187. An army marched beneath a relentless summer sun. Thousands of knights, infantry, war horses, supply wagons stretched across the rocky hills of the Holy Land. Their banners still flew proudly. Their armor reflected the morning light. Every soldier believed the decisive battle still lay ahead. Their commanders studied the horizon. Their priests carried sacred relics. Confidence filled every rank. They had defeated powerful enemies before. They believed they would do so again. But something unseen had already begun to shape their fate. It carried no sword. It wore no armor. It raised no banner. It made no sound. Yet with every mile, it grew stronger. The march became slower. The air became heavier. Every breath demanded more effort. The men searched the horizon, hoping to find what they desperately needed. Instead, they found only more empty hills. Days later, one of the strongest armies ever assembled in the Holy Land would begin to collapse before the battle had truly begun. For centuries, history remembered the generals, the kings, the warriors, but the land remembers something else. This is the story of how nature became the first battlefield. By the summer of 1187, the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem faced the greatest crisis in its history. For nearly 90 years, the Crusader states had survived in the Holy Land through powerful castles, experienced knights, and constant warfare. Despite repeated conflicts, they had managed to hold Jerusalem. Now, a new threat had emerged. Saladin had united Egypt, Syria, and much of the surrounding Muslim world under a single command. Unlike earlier rivals, he possessed the resources to wage a prolonged campaign. His objective was unmistakable: destroy the Crusader army, recover Jerusalem. The Crusader leaders understood the danger. Remaining inside their fortresses would only delay the inevitable. If they hoped to save the kingdom, they needed one decisive victory. So they gathered nearly every fighting man available: knights wearing heavy mail armor, infantry armed with spears and shields, archers, mounted warriors. Supply caravans followed behind them. It became one of the largest armies the Kingdom of Jerusalem had ever assembled. The campaign looked straightforward: march east, confront Saladin, win the battle, protect Jerusalem. On parchment maps, the plan appeared simple, but maps rarely measure the true cost of the land. Long before either army raised a sword, the landscape had already begun rewriting the campaign. The Crusader army departed from the springs of Sephoria. For the moment, water was plentiful. Morale remained high. The soldiers believed the hardest fighting still lay ahead. The first hours passed without serious difficulty. Then the landscape slowly began to change. The green surroundings disappeared behind them. Open hills stretched toward every horizon. Trees became scarce. Shade almost vanished. The July sun climbed higher with every passing hour. Heavy armor trapped heat against the body. Helmets became ovens beneath the relentless sunlight. Each step demanded more energy than the last. Water disappeared faster than anyone had expected. What had seemed like enough for the journey suddenly looked dangerously insufficient. Meanwhile, Saladin refused to force a decisive battle. Instead, his cavalry shadowed the Crusader march, harassing the columns while denying them easy access to wells and springs. The army pressed forward. Horses struggled beneath heavily armored riders. Supply animals weakened across the rocky terrain. Dust rose beneath thousands of marching feet. With every passing mile, the soldiers lost not only strength, but also the resources they needed to survive. By the time the sun reached its highest point, the enemy was no longer the greatest concern. The march itself had become the battle. By the second day, exhaustion had spread throughout the army. Water skins were nearly empty, and every remaining drop was carefully rationed. Many soldiers had already begun suffering from dehydration. Lips cracked beneath the relentless heat. Throats burned with every breath. The summer wind swept across the exposed hills, carrying only hot, dry air. Instead of offering relief, every gust pulled more moisture from exhausted bodies. Dust rose beneath thousands of marching feet. The horizon grew hazy. According to medieval chroniclers, fires were set in the dry grass surrounding the Crusader positions. Smoke drifted across the exhausted columns. Breathing became increasingly difficult. Visibility declined. Orders became harder to hear. Groups slowly lost contact with one another. The disciplined army that had marched from Sephoria began to lose its cohesion. Horses collapsed beneath armored riders. Some soldiers abandoned shields and equipment simply to keep moving. Others searched desperately for water that could not be found. With every passing hour, the landscape weakened the army more effectively than any direct attack. Before the first decisive charge, fatigue had already spread through every formation. Strength had become exhaustion. Confidence had become desperation. The battlefield had not yet reached its deadliest moment, but the army was already being broken apart by heat, distance, and the absence of water. On July 4th, 1187, the exhausted Crusader army finally reached the twin volcanic hills known as the Horns of Hattin. The soldiers were physically drained. Many had marched for hours with almost no water. Their horses were barely able to continue. The army that had left Sephoria full of confidence no longer resembled the force that now prepared for battle. Saladin understood the moment perfectly. He had no reason to rush. Time had already weakened his opponent. When the attack began, the Crusaders attempted to hold their ground, but fatigue spread through every formation. Heavy armor became an unbearable burden beneath the blazing sun. Many soldiers lacked the strength to fight as they normally would. Cavalry charges lost their momentum. Infantry formations began to break apart. The exhausted army found itself surrounded. The battle that followed was fierce, but it was also tragically predictable. Long before swords determined the outcome had already been written by the land itself. The Battle of Hattin lasted only a single day. Its consequences reshaped the history of the Holy Land. Historians estimate that the Crusader army numbered between 20 and 25,000 men when the campaign began. By the battle's end, that army had effectively ceased to exist. Around 10 to 15,000 soldiers were killed. Thousands more were taken prisoner. Among the captives was King Guy of Jerusalem. Many of the kingdom's most experienced knights were either dead or in chains. The sacred relic known as the True Cross, carried into battle as a symbol of divine protection, was captured by Saladin's forces. Its loss sent shockwaves throughout the Christian world. But the greatest loss was not the relic, it was the army itself. Without a field army to defend the kingdom, one stronghold after another fell. Cities that had resisted for decades suddenly stood exposed. Only a few months later, Jerusalem surrendered to Saladin. The defeat at Hattin had changed the balance of power across the entire region. What began as a single military campaign ended with the loss of the Crusaders' greatest prize. History remembers Saladin's victory at Hattin, but victory had another architect. The scorching summer sun, the barren hills, the long march across unforgiving terrain, the absence of reliable water. None of them carried a sword. None of them needed one. Yet together, they steadily weakened one of the strongest armies in the Holy Land before the decisive battle had fully unfolded. The Battle of Hattin became more than a military defeat. It marked the collapse of the Crusader Kingdom's military power and opened the road to the recapture of Jerusalem. For centuries, historians have studied the commanders, the tactics, and the decisions that shaped the campaign. But Hattin offers another lesson. Geography is never just the backdrop of history. Under the right conditions, it becomes one of the most powerful forces on the battlefield. Kings planned the campaign. Commanders led the march. Soldiers prepared for battle. But in the end, the land demanded a price no army could escape. The Horns of Hattin remain one of history's clearest reminders that before an enemy can defeat an army, nature often defeats it first.